You know what really makes us mad is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to punklottopod. I'm your co-host, Justine Hensley.
I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we assign a year at random and choose one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss. But today, we are Patreon-sponsored. Our friend Jason is joining us to talk about an album from 1995. And Dylan, what is that album?
It is Yeah, Me Too by Gaunt.
And we get into it on the show, but like there's definitely, Dylan and I were like, what's a Gaunt?
Yes. Quite a bit of mystery.
This was a Patreon-sponsored episode, and if you want to hear more on Patreon, you head over to patreon.com/punklottopod. For $1, you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. New audio started last week, and hopefully I could talk about it. It's called 2022 A to Z, and it's where I go through all the albums I listened to from 2022 in alphabetical order by artist. So each episode will be based on a letter of the alphabet. So A, B, C, and D are already posted, and E will probably be going up the same day as this episode, assuming I could stay ahead of it. My notes are up to G, and that would be next Friday from when I'm recording this. So I should be able to stay ahead, but we'll see what happens. That's for $1. And if you too want to sponsor an episode and choose the album we talk about, you can join our $10 tier. Just sign up for the $10 tier. Let us know what album you want to talk about, and then you can drop off to the $1 tier or off entirely. We'll appreciate it either way, and we'll do the episode. It'll be in the main feed. My voice is not doing great. I have a cold, and it has wrecked my voice, and lots of audio recording is not helping it anymore. So we're on all the social medias: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at punklottopod, punklottopod@gmail.com. We have a voicemail line, 202-688-PUNK. Start calling in and leaving your messages about your favorite albums of 2022, and we will play them on the show. I guess I need to start scheduling some guests for some bonus audio. And yeah. December's going to be a busy month for the pod because no school means I have more free time, I guess. We'll see. All right. Anything before we go into the episode, Dylan?
That's it. Enjoy this conversation, because I did.
Yeah, it's a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun. Here you go. So we are joined here by our new friend, Jason. Jason, how's it going?
It's going all right. How are you guys doing tonight?
Pretty good. If you've listened to last week's podcast, I mentioned that I have a cold, and due to the way we're recording these episodes, I still have that cold. It's just being released a week later. But if, for listeners' sake, apologies for the scratchy voice, and hopefully I'll be able to edit around any coughs or sniffles or anything like that. But getting over that. But yeah, this is a fun one. We've talked to you. I'm trying to remember the first time we interacted. Do you remember that?
No, I'm not completely sure. I don't know if I interacted with you guys. I know I've been listening since episode 1. I know I started listening. I think you were on like episode 8 or 9, and then I went back and listened to everything. But I don't know exactly when I interacted. That would have been It might have been something Dave said, and then I interacted, or it might have been on Instagram. I could look there, but
yeah,
I don't. It's been a while.
So you started on episode 8 when it was new? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Whoa.
I think that one was new.
Jeez,
And
I had no idea you've been around that long. You're like the only one.
Probably, but because it's like,
oh, what was episode 8? Now I'm really curious to see what that was. Probably a terrible episode that I don't recommend people listen to.
Yeah, I keep saying like it's like the TSOL one is, but that's like the first one, right?
Yeah, right. That's the very first one.
I remember that, because I was like going through podcasts trying to find something to listen to, and everybody talked about new music, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I really don't talk about new music, and I don't really like to hear about it most of the time because I don't ever have time to check it out. So I was looking for something that kind of where I was just looking for somebody that reviewed music because I kind of miss doing that myself.
Yeah.
And so you guys kind of helped me get back into that whenever I get the urge to do it. But
yeah. I looked at episode 8.
It's been a while.
I looked at episode 8. It was one of our Halloween spectaculars where he talked about the murder dolls. So that's probably not the first one you did.
No, it was not that one. I would have been like, no, I'm not listening to these guys talk about garbage. But so it must have been before that. Maybe a couple episodes before that.
Well, that's awesome. We appreciate you sticking with us that long. That's
listening to those first couple of episodes and not immediately going like, yeah, not that. And actually sticking with us for this long we really appreciate that.
Yeah. No problem. Okay, it's yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I would say it's usually pretty much everything that you cover I liked. I didn't like the back-to-back Paramore episodes, but that was about it. Not really into them, but I can understand why maybe some younger people are, but I was just like, back-to-back? Wow.
Yeah, that was a fun one. Was that both guests? Yeah, Dylan was even on either one of those.
I was on the second one.
Oh, were you on?
It was Cowboy Boy.
That was
Olivia.
Boy. Okay, we did Riot with Ange then. Well, so you mentioned yourself that you do a little writing and reviewing, and I definitely follow your accounts where you do that, your Substack and your Instagrams where you mainly were focused on like 90s punk. So you said they got you back into writing. How long ago were you writing first?
Well, in the very early 90s, I did a zine that went through a bunch of names. And then I kind of stopped in the early 2000s. And then I was writing for Scene Point Blank, which was an online. I don't even know if it's still around.
Yeah,
but I did a bunch of reviews on there. So, and then kind of like the membership ownership changed. And, you just kind of get burnt out. You're getting like CDs in the mail, and it's just stuff you don't really want to give the time to, but you feel obligated because, you have a stack of 20 CDs you got to review by the end of the month. So I kind of stopped after that. And then I was, I floated around a bunch of ideas. I did do like 2 years ago, I started the zine again. And then I realized this is really expensive and it's taking money out of my comics. So I was like, I can't. So I finally settled with the Substack. And now I'm kind of at a place now where it's just, I don't really know what to do with it. I kind of feel like I'm repeating myself a lot. After I did the grunge thing, that really killed me because I don't want to ever listen to a band like Brad or even like Stone Temple Pilots ever again. And it's just like, I was using the, rate your music for that. And I'm just like, maybe I should have just picked noise rock and went from there. But I don't know. I'll figure that out eventually. Go back through it and see if I want to dip into these. I don't think my writing sometimes is all that great, and I don't have an editor like I did like on Scene Point Blank, and sometimes I just want to hurry up and write everything and not edit it, and then I feel bad when I read it and it looks like I'm missing brain cells or something, because I miss words or
you got.
I know it's not important,
Yeah, you got to get the thought out. I was saying you have to get the thought out on paper or it's going to be gone. So you have to skip words.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Because it's like I listen to it at work and then I get home and that's when I start writing. Like I make notes on my phone, but it's like I got to hurry up and I listened to this like 8 hours ago. I don't remember what this German pop punk band sounded like 8 hours ago. So yeah, that's kind of how it goes. But I don't know. I always get the bug to write. It's just I don't ever, I'm just never consistent with it, and I just wish I was, because I think if I was consistent with it, then it'd go better. But yeah, people can follow me.
Yeah,
if they want to on there on the Substack. So
yeah,
we plug a Substack every week, and I don't write it ever.
Yeah, right.
So. Go follow. Yeah. You might get a surprise.
I think.
I mean, there's a few of them.
Go ahead. You're talking about Substack.
Yeah, there's like a few of them up there. So, and if you're looking for something to new to listen to, if you can figure out what I'm trying to say, you might find something. So.
Well, I don't think you should sell yourself short. I enjoy your writing. I've enjoyed all your Instagram posts and the newsletter. So I think it's the grunge that did it. It killed your will to write.
Yeah. I don't know what I was thinking. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to listen to Nirvana, and I'm gonna have to listen to Pearl Jam. But it was just kind of like you said. It was like those lesser than bands that sounded like them. Oof, duh.
Yeah, grunge is not one of those genres you can go very deep on and get a lot out of it, because it was so fast for people to just start imitating what the big bands were doing.
Right. Oh yeah. And just so many. It's like I didn't get to even to bands like Malfunction with FUNK, and I'm sure they were pretty funky. It was just stuff like that. I mean, there was some good stuff, but the stuff that was good, I already heard. Like, I know Seaweed was going to be good. I knew that Tad album was good. I was surprised by the whole album. I didn't think I was going to like that, but I actually liked the whole album. But otherwise, yeah, everything else is just kind of like, yeah, this is, I'm 14 again and back in high school, and nobody I'm from a very small town, so even liking grunge didn't make me popular. It just made the popular kids knew what it was, so they could just make fun of me more of it. So yeah, it wasn't like a great thing.
They could be more pointed with their bullying.
Yeah, they could be like
more specific with oh yeah, you like Mother Love Bone.
Yeah. I got a Mother Love Bone for you, and it's just like, yeah, okay, guys, I get it. One thing, the thing about my high school though, that movie, what is it, Angus? Mm-hmm. It's got the soundtracks Green Day. That's my high school. They actually filmed it in my high school.
Oh, that's literally
a year after I graduated. Yeah, my gym locker is in the movie. I'm not. I was already graduated, but
right. Yeah. Well, that's a piece of 90s punk. What do you call it? I don't know. It's a classic to a certain section of punks. Well, let's go ahead and plug the names of those Substacks too, just so that everyone can follow them if they'd like. What are they going by now?
I think the one Substack, the one that I write on the most. I just have the one. It has to be some variation of songs about chocolate and girls.
Yep, that's it. Yeah, I look at it now.
Okay, yeah. So a lot of people don't know where they think it's because it's 90s punk. I'm talking about girls. It's not. It's actually an Undertow song, and it's an Undertow song about the Rolling Stones. I didn't know that until some guy pointed it out to me. I was like, that's a cool name. I'm going to start branding myself that.
Yeah.
And then some guy told me, he's like, did you know what that song's about? And I'm like, no. I mean, I've listened to it. But yeah, he's like, yeah, that's a Undertow song about the Rolling Stones.
Whenever I read it, for some reason, I think of that was it a movie? It's called Blood and Chocolate. Do you remember that?
No.
It was it's a mid 2000s, maybe late 2000s vampire werewolf movie. It was trying to capitalize off of the Twilight trend.
It's 2007, and it's on Tubi right now. If you have Tubi, Tubi's great.
Dylan, you were muted when you said that.
No, this looks. So it's looking like a kind of like a Twilight thing.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. Skip that one.
Yeah, I never saw
by Katja Von Garner. What does she do?
Bandits? Oh, is that Brad Pitt movie? No, not Brad Pitt. Is that Bruce Willis?
No, I think it's German.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think Blood and Chocolates was a book too, like a teen book. I don't know why we went down this rabbit hole, but you've also got the Instagram and the Twitter.
Right. Yeah. When I started it, the Instagram was going to be just for music, and the Twitter was just going to be for comics, and it just kind of blended a little bit. Yeah, the Twitter side's more. If you want me to talk about comics more, then you probably want to follow the Twitter. If it's music, I don't even know. I used to do reviews on there too, but I kind of stopped because I don't like the formatting of it.
Yeah.
And so, but either one. I mean, it's kind of weird. It's kind of like the music side has kind of gone more to the back burner, and the comics have come back. But I didn't collect comics in the 90s because back then everyone thought all the 90s comics were big guns and pouches, and some of them were, but there's also good stuff, and I didn't know about it. For being in a small town, so I just kind of stopped reading and got more into music. But now it's kind of like I read more comics than I actually listen to music. So
yeah, you post it's like with the Shake Your CLZ thing every
CLZ, yep,
every day, and it's
every
like
morning.
Is that something? What does that mean?
Like,
Shake Your CLZ.
So CLZ is an app where you can keep track of all your comics on. Just like there's now Shake Your Discogs. You can do the same thing, where you can pull up your collection, shake your phone, and it'll randomly pull up a comic, or it'll randomly pull up an album.
Oh, it's literally shake it. Wow, okay.
Yeah, I didn't think that when I first did it, I just kind of scrolled and then I'd stop. But no, you can literally shake your phone and it will randomly pick a comic for you.
For some reason, I thought you were just like randomly reading comics, and I was like, man, he's all over the place with like what he picks. Like he's got a mid 80s Alpha Flight here, and then like a Red Sonja from the 70s here. Yeah,
no, it's just stuff that I have collected. I haven't read, like most comic collectors, I haven't read all my comics. I have read all of the Alpha Flight though. I've gotten through Alpha Flight, but I mostly read trades from the library. That's where I get most of my reading done. Is that because I can't afford 5 trades a week of new stuff, so I just I get them from the library.
Yeah, I didn't finish Alpha Flight, but I got pretty far. I want to say I definitely got through all the John Byrne. I think I got through all of the Mantlo, and who's after Mantlo? Is it?
It's the guy that did Strike Force Moratori. The box is sitting right over there.
Yeah, let me do that. Man, I shouldn't do that. Anyway, there's a point where Alpha Flight gets real hard to read. You're just like, it's so bad. yeah,
there's some, I mean, I liked some of it, but man, after a while, it's after Peter B. Gillis was even after that guy. But anyway, so it's just like, it started off so great, and even John Byrne got kind of bored with it, he said, after that's why it switched over like mid-story, and then it went to Mantlo, who was doing Hulk at the time. Yeah. That's why the Hulk shows up. But then, it was just like the very end of it, towards the 90s, it gets very 90ish and really bad, except for, the one issue you need with North Star coming out, because that was the first gay character. Even though John Byrne wanted him to be gay at the very beginning, and Jim Shooter wouldn't let him, because they're like, we have to sell comics in the South, quotation marks, and stuff like that. But you can tell, because like the first time they called North Star in the comics, there's like he's like lounging out with some guy by the pool, and the guy in the pool's like, hello. Yes, I'll get him for a moment, because So I guess stuff was already written, but they're like, no, you guys can't do that right now. So we have to wait 20 years almost before we can do that.
And he doesn't even get to be the writer to do it.
No. Oh, yeah, I'm sure,
I don't know if I would want John Byrne to write it now, though.
John Byrne now? Yeah.
That's what I was. Yeah. Maybe he can make him hate women and be gay. That's kind of how John Byrne goes these days. But,
well, if you're a comic fan, I highly recommend the follow. It's a good follow. I definitely liked your point, either yesterday or today, about if you have comics in your profile, maybe actually talk about comics and not movies.
I get so many follows that, and it's just like, I'll follow this, and then it's like, which MCU character do you think is good? I'm just like, I love those movies, but I don't really care if that's where you're coming from with it. It's just like I can separate the two. I can separate the comics from the MCU, and the even, the the DC side and all that stuff. But it's just like, just call it what you are. If you're going to talk about the MCU, then call yourself MCU guy 927 or whatever.
Yeah, that was always my thing where like people were like, "Oh, these are amazing," and I'm like, "Yeah," and the comics are better.
Right.
Almost always better. I mean, there's obviously bad comics, but what's being drawn from is almost always better.
At my job before this, my boss was a huge comic nerd, and we were on the same age, and he was talking about he was at Target and he bought a Marvel shirt, and then he saw some little girl, like some teenager maybe, with a shirt. He's like, "I fought the war so you could wear that T-shirt." It's like, what are you talking about? He's like, "Yeah, when I was in high school, they used to pick on me. Now it's the coolest thing." I'm just like, yeah, but it's not the same thing. But you gotta just let people enjoy what they're going to enjoy.
Yeah. Gatekeeping is there's a reason why people don't like to go into comic shops a lot.
Yeah.
Because because there's this I don't mean to turn this into a comics podcast, but there was definitely this era of like the Marvel Now era and like a little bit after that, like the all different Marvel stuff where like all these guys online would be like, nobody wants this, nobody's reading this, and it's like they're not coming to the store to buy it. They're getting the digital copies or they're waiting for the trade. Like the people who are enjoying it completely away from you.
Yeah.
Right. And that was like the last time I I still read just about everything Marvel that comes out, but all new, and that was great. The Hawkeye and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't really a bad book coming out at that time, and still, that's what people do. They just complain about everything because it's not what it was when they were a kid.
Yeah.
And so they just don't think anyone else is going to want to read it.
If I don't want to read it, no one would want to read it. It's like, it doesn't work like that. Well, cool. So let's get into the rest of the format of the show then. So this was a Patreon sponsored episode, so we thank you very, very much for signing up for the $10 tier and selecting our album to talk about today.
Yeah. I finally kind of got out of I was kind of like, well, I'm like, I picked this album before we get into it. I picked this album a long time ago because I'm like, I remember on one of your episodes, you were talking about garage punk, and you were talking about the New Bomb Turks, which is a band in there, and you're like, who'd want to listen to that? I'm like, well, you guys should listen to this album because this album is in the same vein and it's really good. So I kind of kept that one in mind, and then I finally broke down and been like, yeah, I think I'm going to talk to them about this one.
Do you remember who said that? Because
I don't remember. It was one of the, like I said, it was one of the earlier episodes, and for some reason I cannot let things go sometimes, and that was just one of them. And I knew it was about the New Bomb Turks because they were on Epitaph, and I was just like, well, that album's actually pretty good, but then I'm like, it's not as good as this one.
I could see that being
there was
either one of us could have said that. I feel like more than likely it would have come from a perspective of like, what is their deal even?
Yeah.
Like, really coming from an uninformed place.
Yeah.
As many of our bad opinions usually do.
Right.
Yeah, those early ones. I don't know. I think we were trying to go for something too, as like, well, you got to be like this to be a host of a podcast, and
you got to be snarky.
Yeah, you don't have to be. I found that just being kind of genuine and honest is actually more popular.
Right.
Save the snark for the things you genuinely don't like.
Right. You actively dislike. Yeah. Well, so since this is a Patreon sponsored episode, we don't go the usual route and assign you a year, but we'll pretend we did. And so the album you selected for us to talk about came out in 1995. So what are some other albums that came out that year that you think are notable or we should talk about?
So when I was going through the list, I mean, there's some pretty big stuff that came out, like Green Day and Insomniac, which I don't think I've even listened to yet, even though I listened to a lot of 90s punk. And then you got Captain Jazz right after that, and then Hum. So it's like and then Rancid. So it keeps like, you keep getting hit left and right. The first one I was thinking about when I was actually going through the list, if I was going like, well, maybe if I pick something else, maybe they won't like this album. Don Caballero 2 was one of them I was going to choose, but that's mostly instrumental, and it's kind of hard to talk about instrumental albums.
Yeah.
But
I really enjoyed Don Caballero. The little bit that I've listened to a couple albums by them, but I think, I don't know if we've ever told this story on the show, but my friend in college went and saw Don Cab in the middle of like a snowstorm in Asheville, and he said it was the most awkward and like worst show he'd ever seen because the main guy, who is the Don Caballero guy,
the drummer,
he was like mean and like yelling at the band for like messing up and like in front of it, like the audience, and just like forcing them to start over, and it was very, he said it was rough.
There is a major lineup change at some point in Don Caballero's career. I'm sure it's entirely just because of his control freak, rhythm dictator role.
Yeah, that man, he has a vision of what he wants, and if you're not part of that vision, you're gone. I mean, they've kind of changed musically after the first two albums were a little bit heavier, then they kind of went to a more indie route, but yeah, so I don't know what the heck brutal prog is, but I never want to hear that ever again in my life.
That's probably some, let's see, characterized by highly intense and visceral songwriting, usually featuring substantial reliance on dissonance, odd time signatures, blistering tempos, angular and mercurial rhythms, and punk's DIY attitude. That didn't tell me shit. This stupid website.
Well,
it's skronk rock. It's like John Zorn, but with guitars.
Well, poor Don there. They were described as brutal prog. The next album was Team Dresch, Personal Best, which is one of my favorite albums of all time. But I'm a almost 50-year-old white guy, and I don't think I'm the right person to talk about that album.
That record does rule, though.
Hopefully, I picked it up. I don't even remember when. I picked it up on cassette, like probably in Mankato, Minnesota. There was a record store over there, and I just picked it up because I was like, I'm gonna listen to this because it's a bunch of Riot Girls, quote unquote, which they aren't. But and it just blew me away from like the first track. It's a solid. It's almost a perfect album. It's like if people like, if I'm going to get into Riot Girl or queercore or anything like this, what album would you suggest? I don't know why anyone would ask me, but I would be like, Team Dresch, Personal Best. Start with that, and then work your way into your Bikini Kills and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, like, does anyone need to be recommended Bikini Kill anymore? Like, there are entry levels.
Yeah. Like my first Riot Girl band, it's you can listen.
They're great.
To
They're great. They really are. But there's other stuff that I think's way better.
Right. I believe you guys talked about Dead Guy, right? Fixation on a coworker.
Yeah, we did that with the band Easy Prey, I think. Right? Was that them?
That's right.
Yeah, right, because they wound up actually getting in touch with Tim Singer, and like he sang on their record, which was really awesome.
Yeah. I just watched their documentary, which is on Tubi. I'm not here from Tubi. Yes, I'm not here from Tubi. I'm not, but it's on there. It's awesome. If you don't know anything about the band, I wouldn't suggest it. But if you know a little bit about the band, it's pretty great. They're a pretty dysfunctional bunch of people back then, and now they're kind of like all older and stuff. But so I know I couldn't do that one. I thought maybe I could torture you with Quicksand Manic Compression, but I decided against it. That's not even one of my favorite Quicksand albums. I mean, there's really only the two. I mean, I know they have some new stuff out, but just listen to Slip. Manic Compression's a good album, but it just goes by way too quick, and it just seems like they were running out of ideas already at that point, or maybe Walter was already thinking about his next 7 bands he wants to start or something like that.
Dylan's the Quicksand hater of the two of us. I think they're fine. Right. Dylan's like, they're bad.
They're fine. Have I ever said that they're bad? I get get tired of them very quickly. I just start tuning them out.
Yeah, I think it's because I'm older. It's just that they were kind of like a new thing. It's like, oh, what is this? It's like like it's kind of hard to describe, but it's like Dylan you always like to describe them as like a new metal band, and they're kind of like a progressive. They're kind of like before the new metal. They were like before Korn or stuff like that, and they weren't as corny or as they were just ex-New York hardcore kids, and then they decided to try make it. I mean, it all kind of starts with Burn. Or it starts with, the Revolution Summer. They were just trying to make it a little bit more heavy, and it kind of got a little, hip-hoppy in the drums. But, nobody is scatting into a mic. No one's wearing, fake eyes, and, you don't have Fred Durst doing it all for the nookie. There's a lot of bands in that are really good, but just Quicksand is kind of the most famous one.
Yeah. And it's not even
the same thing.
It's not even that it's a bad idea of like hip hop drums with hardcore. Like on paper, that's a great idea. I think my problem with Quicksand is always it's who it is and the expectation that I have, and it's the same problem I've had with rival schools where I'm like, I want to like this so much more because of who it is, but it doesn't do a lot for me when I listen to it.
Right.
You ever listen to Walter's stoner band that he's got, like that's fairly new, one of the more recent ones he's done?
No, I've listened to Quicksand. I mean, Gorilla Biscuits' World Fastest Car, which was pre-Quicksand, and then I listened to the Walking Concert album, which is his Beatles album, and then I've listened to not the newest Quicksand album, but the one that came out before that, and just I haven't really got around. The one that came out before I didn't really like. It might be because it's just kind of the three of them now, and then they have a new guitar player because they kicked out the dude, whatever his name was, from Bold because of problems. And I think he wrote more than Walter or anyone else has said. I just think he was kind of a piece that kind of like these three guys are in their own group, and then he was kind of off to the side, so it was more like there's more of a friction, and sometimes that makes better music when you got like four dudes up there that just want to play, everything that the main songwriter wants, and not anyone chirping in. And I kind of feel like that's what's going on with them now. I could be totally wrong. I don't want to talk crap about one of my favorite bands, but it's just I just haven't connected with any of their new stuff. I like Rival Schools a lot. I did get to see them, and I've seen Quicksand a few times. But, yeah, I don't want to be. Speaking of, I hope somebody sometimes picks No Means No album, especially if they pick Wrong, because that album is awesome, but it's from 1989. So maybe I'll just have to do it again and make you guys talk about that one, because that album is so good. I know you guys were just talking about that band Wrong. That's where they got their name from.
Oh, I didn't realize. Oh, yeah.
Like on a Patreon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Friend of the show, Adam Yo, writer at No Echo, he's a big No Means No fan. So like maybe he'd be the one to get us in there.
Right. Yeah. I don't remember the one the world hood of the world as such. I don't remember that one that well as much as Wrong. Let's see here. There's a lot of. You can tell me when to stop. The first No Doubt album, I believe, is on here.
Yeah. Tragic Kingdom.
Yeah. No, the Beacon Street collection. The one even before that.
Are they both 95? I wonder if they put that out because Tragic Kingdom was a hit.
Yeah, I bet you this is all they're like. They don't, because it's Rate Your Music, they don't consider it a compilation.
Even though it's 100% a compilation.
Yeah.
It's like their rule is like 50% unreleased material makes it an album. I was like, just because it's unreleased doesn't mean it's an album.
Right.
Dylan, what are some anything that jumps off the page for you?
This is an interesting year. It is a heavy year. Some big records. Dear You by Jawbreaker is number 20 on the most popular Rate Your Music punk records. And I'm like, how is that not in the top 5? But there's like, when you look at like, well, all right, Rancid, No Doubt, okay, Cap and Jazz, all right. So yeah, the last Ramones record, Adios Amigos, a very solid farewell. What else do we have?
I'm totally with you guys. The Ramones do not have a bad album. So
the Covers record, that's the one I'd skip.
Yeah, that one's a little weak.
But they didn't even write those, so like, do those even count? You know?
Right. I mean, they're no Mass Marauder or anything, but.
Oh yeah. I just realized what you were saying with that. Yeah.
Sorry, I should have probably put some context with that.
He's coming for you, Dave.
Fan of the show, Dave. That was the first time I was at work, and I like took off my headphones and put them on the desk. I'm like, what is this man talking about? There is no way somebody can think that, but bless his heart.
Yeah. That spun off into like a whole other like conversation too with our other friend Steve, and it was funny just to see like like what what are you talking about? Yeah. I'm looking at it myself, and like, say it was like my choice and I could choose, because when it is my choice, sometimes I tend to choose something a little bit more off the beaten path, or like wait for somebody to pick something. But if let's say if I was going to pick something bigger, I would probably go with something like, probably one of my favorites, Unsane's Scattered, Smothered, and Covered. Like, I would probably go with that, because I love that record so much. It's one of my favorite like noise rock albums of all time.
Yeah, I still can't watch the video for Scrape. I believe that's off that one.
Yeah,
with all the skateboarding accidents.
Mm-hmm.
Back in when I was going to shows at First Avenue, before they changed everything up, they used to have this big movie screen, and they just play random stuff. And Scrape was one of the videos that they played, and I was just like, I can't watch people getting broken bones here before I'm seeing arc welder or whatever. But yeah, that video has left impression on me that has not gone away.
It's so funny because it's like it's known for that video. It's probably the thing that band is most known for to the general audience. They saw that skateboard compilation video on MTV and then heard the song in a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game. Well, I think we've talked enough about the charts, so let's actually talk about the album that you selected for us to talk about today, and that is Yeah, Me Too by Gaunt. Gaunt real quick. So Gaunt formed in Columbus, Ohio in 1991. Their sound has been described as garage punk, which I wrote in my notes on the very first song. Is this garage punk? The group originally formed out of the ashes of the band Black Juju. In 1992, they released their first EP, Whitey the Man, on Thrill Jockey and Crypt Records. They recorded their debut full-length Sob Story with Steve Albini and released it in 1994. They released their second album, I Could See Your Mom From Here, earlier in 1995, before we got to this record, which was released November 21st, 1995 on Amphetamine Reptile Records. This is the band's third album. The personnel on the album is Brett Lewis on bass, Sam Brown on drums, Jovan Karcic on guitar, Karcic, and Jerry Wick on guitar and vocals. And the album was produced by Tim Mack of Halo of Flies, who, while recording this album, struck up a friendship that led to him being the band's live sound guy for the rest of their run. And I have some more notes, but I'll get to those later. So first thing I always ask, you kind of hinted at it, but why did you choose this album for us to talk about?
I think you're muted.
Sorry. Because of the garage punk thing I mentioned earlier, and I just kind of saw it was kind of a genre of punk you guys haven't really covered yet. Maybe a little bit here and there, but not really. This album isn't like a classic for me. It's maybe I've started listening to it in the last maybe 3 or 4 years. I heard about the band from a book called We Never Learn, the Gunk Punk Undergut from 1988 from 2001 by Eric Davidson, who's also in New Bomb Turks. And they're covered in there. And then I was like, well, and so I didn't really know what they meant. I mean, I've heard the New Bomb Turks before, but I didn't know what they meant about Gaunt being like this garage punk band because they were on Amphetamine Reptile. If you're familiar with that label, you're going to think, this is going to sound like Helmet. This is going to sound like Tar. This is going to sound like the Melvins.
Yeah.
And so I kind of passed it off for a while because in the book, he really doesn't describe what they sound like. And then, so finally I was getting around to where I am now, where I'm listening to like all the stuff from the 90s. I put it on and it was me and I'm like, wow, this doesn't sound like an Amphetamine Reptile band at all.
Yeah.
And it kind of sounds like a garage punk band, but garage punk is just kind of it's such a weird subgenre because you get everything from Gaunt and then everything from like the Super Suckers. And then you get anything from like, I don't know, the Red Ants are considered a garage punk band. And then there's that, I can't even think of his name, that dude from England that releases something like every day. It's considered like a garage, the Headcoats.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Like that's considered garage punk, and so it's kind of like you don't really know. It's such a kind of a weird genre that people just kind of throw stuff in because I think just because from the 90s, people just threw everything in because these are bands that just played together more often than they kind of sounded like. But it was, I mean, there's more similar. They're more bands that aren't subscribed to like the whole punk ethos things of like, we have to play all ages shows. We have to, 3/4 of us are straight edge and one of us is vegan. Mm-hmm. They're more like a band we will drink you under the table. And they always seem like the bands that have like a better record collection than everybody else because they will pick like really great songs to cover that are from like, early country or early, whatever. So it was just kind of like, I still didn't expect this band to, really come at the way that they did. And I've listened to like all their discography. The one with the Sob Story is more of a kind of a hardcore punk album with, Steve Albini putting the drums up in front like he does on everything. And then, the album before this one, I Can See Your Mom, is you can kind of hear more of a Superchunk sound to it. You can kind of hear more in the melodies, but it's still in the garagey kind of punk verse of them. And then this album, and then their last album, they were on a major label, and that one is still pretty good, but it's really polished, and it's kind of like, and it's a kind of a mishmash of styles of more of just, you can kind of, it sounded like there was maybe a producer in their ear trying to see if they could make it big, and just, nobody cared. And by that time, the band broke up. And then I believe, and I forgot, was it 2001 or 2002? The Jerry, he was hit and run by a car and died.
Yeah.
So that kind of put the end of the band.
Yeah.
Right there and then.
Yeah, I read that. It was 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hit and run. I found, I think it's the Wikipedia under like the references. There's a link to like, I guess the news story about when the person who hit him was convicted, and he only got was like 3 years probation, and because his argument was like, I didn't know I thought somebody threw something at my car. That was his defense, and
great,
yeah, just a sad story. Yeah, I mean, and then the article tried to be like, well, he was over the limit for the state for alcohol, riding his bicycle and carrying a pizza. I was like, well, he could have been driving a car, he was
right. I think he was like, he had the pizza because he was coming home from work where he worked, at a pizza place. I believe that's where he worked at, or a bar or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, how's he supposed to? He was just coming home from work.
And he rode his bike. I mean, he was drunk, maybe, sure. But, doesn't get you out. It was a weird, like, detail to throw in there where I was like, you didn't need to add this. This is some character assassination.
It's a weird
victim blaming.
Right. Yeah. You're drunk on a bike, so that means you should be able to be hit by a car.
Right.
He was expendable because there was alcohol in his system.
Right. Yeah. Which, because the guy didn't, he wasn't like caught that night. That guy could have been drunk. We don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, sorry. Got off on a. That line made me mad in the article. I was like, why are you bringing that up? That's awful. But, Dylan, what is your Gaunt knowledge prior to listening to this record?
I think my immediate reaction was Gaunt.
Question mark?
It was the only thing was that I think that's a name I've heard. That was really my only association with Gaunt. I was like, that's definitely a 90s band. Even before I knew what year it was, I was like, that's got to be a 90s band. I've heard of them. They are important to someone or some genre or subgenre in some way, and I don't know what that is. So we're going to find out. Yeah, that's my prior knowledge.
My first exposure to Gaunt, I believe, was on tumblr.com. It was definitely one of the bands that, like, they were brought up a lot by people who were, like, super into punk, and they were like, oh, this band's super underrated. Like, that was always the frame of reference I had for Gaunt, that they were an underrated band that people didn't talk about enough. And I definitely remember the next record, Kryptonite, like the album art being on Tumblr a lot. It's just like green with silver font on it. And I probably like sampled something around that period, but I don't really remember what I heard or what I thought I heard. So I was still kind of like, yeah, they're like a 90s pop punk band, and that wasn't right. When I put it on, the first thing I go is like, oh, that's not what I thought this was at all. You mentioned the New Bomb Turks earlier, and that is probably the culturally most relevant connection, because they were from the same area. They played a lot of shows together.
Yeah.
They play like similar sounds. I'd say Gaunt definitely goes in a more punk or a pop punk direction, whereas New Bomb Turks go in a little harder, kind of noisier direction.
Right. Yeah. The New Bomb Turks are kind of like a straightforward hardcore band with a goofy singer, which a lot of garage punk is.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like Gas Huffers, kind of that way, except they're a little bit more melodic. But it's just kind of like, there's like they'll always, most of the bands, if there isn't like women involved or anything like that, it's usually a guy who kind of has like a country yarl going on, and then the band kind of plays punk behind him.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like, if you would have to describe garage punk to somebody, that would be the easiest way to do it. But yeah, it's usually more noisier than, say, your typical 90s pop punk band. It's definitely not skate punk, even though I've seen them I've seen Gaunt described as that. But yeah,
it definitely makes me think of something like, oh no, these bands have like some Screamin' Jay Hawkins records in their discography that they personally own, like that kind of punk band.
Yeah, it seems like the kind of band that they don't go out of their way to offend people, but they might offend people if they're drunk enough on stage.
Yeah.
It seems like they're kind of like, I mean, one of the bands they played with was the Thomas Slave Apartments. They played with them a lot, and that's probably a name that probably wouldn't fly today.
Yeah,
but they're still pretty good.
I was looking up articles, and I read 3 different articles that said Gaunt plays with New Bomb Turks and the Thomas Jefferson Slave Apartments, and I was like, who the fuck is that band? I have never heard that band before in my life. And why does MTV know who that band is and mention it in 2 separate articles?
Oh, you must have dug a little bit deeper than I did. I went to the Wikipedia and then I looked up some reviews, but that was about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, what? Why this name is the name that you bring up? But I mean, it'd be cool if that band was like consisted of like mostly black individuals. Like that'd be cool. But nope, I think it's all white guys.
Yeah. I think they're all this. I think they probably just mentioned that band because that's the one that you know, who's ever reading the article in 2002 could, you know, clutch their pearls and be like, I never. And it's like, the band's probably broken up. Don't worry about it. They're done. Also from Columbus, Ohio, active from 1989 to 2000. So they got 11 years out of that. But, they're on Bandcamp now. Sweet. I've checked out a few of their albums. They were on, I think there's maybe someone in that band's the owner of Data Panic, which released a lot of like Ohio, Columbus type bands like in the 80s and 90s. Yeah. It's not a label I've gone on a deep dive yet, but I'll get there eventually. Yeah. Other few things I noticed doing some research. So this was Brett and Sam's first album with the band. They were replacing the previous bassist and drummers Eric Barth and Jeff Regensberger. Sam would also later play in New Bomb Turks as well, which makes sense. If they're the Columbus scene, it makes sense to play together. Right. When was the last time you think you listened to this album before bringing it up for the show? I listened to it on Friday. Is that the day you sent me the message? I was like, okay, are you sure this is the one? Because it's like, you know, I'm like, yeah, we'll go with this one because it's been kind of in, like I said, it's been in the back of my head for a while. Yeah, it still holds up. I mean, I like it because it's, go ahead. Yeah, it's like 10 minutes, it's 10 songs, 30 minutes, and it just all kind of cooks by. Mm-hmm. You could definitely call it a pop punk album, but it's more ramshackle. I could hear it's kind of like they're playing to the point. They're playing so fast that they're about ready to fall apart, and then it kind of comes all back together. Not like in a screamo way, but you know, I can definitely hear it like with the drummer a lot. That it seems like he is kind of maybe a little bit behind the band, and then he tries to catch up, and then he kind of, you know, and then he gets into the pocket, and then sometimes he'll lose it, and it's like I kind of miss that with bands because with a lot of like newer stuff that I hear, it's like everything is kind of compressed and perfect. And I kind of miss bands that will just record, you know, this album was recorded in a few days, I guess. I believe that was on, mm-hmm. They said it was recorded like maybe in 7 days. And it sounds like an album that was recorded in 7 days. Yeah, Dylan, what did you think of the album?
So when I put it on, you know, my initial reaction to this being assigned was Gaunt with a big question mark. My response on like within 30 seconds was, oh, Gaunt. I get Gaunt. My initial reaction, like my very first thought was, this is early Superchunk, but more decidedly punk. Like, I get the impression that they said, we're going to start a punk band. Whereas I can see how someone could make the case that Superchunk wasn't, like, actively thinking, yeah, we're a punk band, though they're certainly heavily influenced by punk. But yeah, Gaunt is, like, a punk band, but to me, they sounded like those first couple of Superchunk records in that, which is where the garage rock, garage punk thing, I'm like, I can see that. I can see the case being made for that if you think of this. This does sound like music that someone might play in a garage, but that's not necessarily what I think of with garage punk. So, and I guess there's kind of like maybe there's two strains of like, there's that, and then there's like, doing 60s garage rock again, but like noisier. But that being said, I could still see like this being a huge influence on like Tenement. And I can definitely see like the similarities, or at least like how a band like Gaunt could also be grouped in with like Rocket from the Crypt. Though they're not on this record, though I do think Kryptonite, the next record, does sound a little bit more like Rocket from the Crypt. They've got like the horns in there, and it's a little more going for it, I guess, in terms of that sound. But yeah, in general, I really, really enjoyed this record. Like, it is thoroughly enjoyable from beginning to end. Like, I would probably need to come back to it to like pick out highlight moments. But overall, I think it's great. I think it's really nice to hear this sound. And like you were saying, Jason, of like how imperfect it is, like, and how ramshackle, and how like, that's something that I love to hear in recordings. I like bad recordings, and I like bands that are not perfectly in time, and they like practiced it. They practiced it a bunch. They really know the song, but they're playing it live and recording it live. And yeah, like the drumming speeding up and slowing down, and the tempo changes all over the place, and like the guitars are just really overblown and fuzzy and feedbacking, and it's really cool to hear something that sounds like this that I haven't heard before from this time period, that isn't a band that I don't like Guided by Voices or something in that world.
Yeah, I when I put it on, I was like, whoa, this is way faster than I thought it would be. Like, I was like, man, they're just like blazing through this. The first track is kind of like an intro track, not even like, not a full song or anything like that. And but it's like, it's real punchy, it's full of like feedback, and then they throw it into like the first full song, which has got these palm muted riffs and like a tambourine in there, it sounds like. But then it's got a really cool like pop punky chorus to it, and I was just like, oh man, I've been sleeping on this band. Like, I was always curious about their name, but I just never dove in for whatever reason. And I probably would have started with Kryptonite. And if I'd started with Kryptonite, I would have been like thought of almost a very different band, because that band also is that record, they're going for something a little different. Probably more what was more popular at the time. This, I feel like, it's like, okay, they're taking this, punks is like their entry point, but they also have a lot of 60s, late 60s, early 70s garage rock in there, and then even this like pseudo Ramones element to it. Like, there's even like 2 or 3 tracks on like the back half of the album where I was like, if this was their sound for the whole record, they probably would have been considered a Ramones core band, and like we probably would have covered them in that bracket.
Yeah, I got a really big like Ramones core adjacent, almost like Night Marchers kind of sensibility, but also with like a Mike Park sounding vocalist too. Like, it was really it's really nice to be able to, like, I could point to all of these different things that I'm like, oh, this reminds me of this band, and this reminds me of that band, and all of these different elements that are kind of like really distinct elements to those specific bands, like all kind of rolled into one band. And I'm like, I didn't know that anyone could do that. I thought that was just Superchunk that sounded like that. I thought that was just Mike Park that sang like that,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that stuff. The first track when I very first listened to it, like a few years ago, I was like, when I heard that first intro thing, I was like, oh, this isn't an Amphetamine Reptile band again.
Yeah, right.
I thought it was. So I don't know if they did that on purpose because they were on Amphetamine Reptile because they knew that was who was going to. I don't know what came first, the album or the signing, because since I'm in Minneapolis, I live in Minneapolis. So Amphetamine Reptiles is kind of like, it's our Sub Pop, it's our Fat Wreck, it's that, if you think of the Amphetamine Reptile, you think of Minneapolis and you think of this certain sound that goes with it. And this is one of the few bands that I've heard on Amphetamine Reptile that doesn't sound like the other bands. Almost all the other bands there's a lot of garage punk in there, like not Vertigo, they're more psychedelic, and but I'm trying to think of some other bands that are on Amphetamine Reptile that's kind of closer to none of them. I believe there is another pop punk band, quote unquote, called Supernova that put out a couple albums, and they're famous for that Chewbacca song from the Clerks soundtrack.
Oh yeah,
right.
If you ever watch Clerks. So yeah, there's them, and then but Amphetamine Reptile does like a bunch of singles too, like Jawbox and Superchunk, and all those bands have been on it, so you can kind of see where this band fits in. But just like as an actual band that released at least one album, yeah, they're kind of an odd band for the label itself.
The connection started because they were asked to do one of those singles, like the Dope Guns singles that AmRev did. I don't know if they actually did one though, but that's kind of the beginning of that.
I think they did.
They probably did. I didn't look at the Spotify bio, and weirdly, the Spotify bio is longer than any other bio I've seen online. So I really wished I'd read this earlier because it goes pretty in depth. But there's a part in here that says they were touring and they made a stop in Minneapolis, where Tom Hazelmeyer, head of Amphetamine Reptiles, put the group up at his home for the night. And while there, Gaunt penned 10 new songs, and Hazelmeyer offered to record the tunes. So it's like they just spent the night at his house and they wrote 10 songs. How does that even
Well, like
happen?
I said, you can kind of tell. What's it? The guy that had Jerry, he was the main songwriter, I believe, in the band. So I don't know, maybe if he had just a whole bunch of ideas in his head.
Yeah.
And then
maybe it could have been like he had all the riffs ready, but like
he had the songs written and then they just learned them.
Yeah. And it says too that he offered to record them, and so then they went to the label's studio, which that was their house producer, was Tim Mack. So it was just like, you're here, hang out for a week and record it. That is a wild story. I didn't know that. Thing was weird though, because I was like, what? I didn't know that. Like, they were on this label, and it seemed really weird to me that they were. But so this kind of actually explains the record a lot more now then. So like,
right.
You said it was a 30-minute album earlier. It's not. It's actually like a 21-minute album.
Oh wow.
It is short. It's 10 songs, 21 minutes, 21 seconds. And so I am a massive proponent of bands releasing short records. I think more bands need to release short albums. Not to say that longer records aren't good and don't have good songs on them, But there's something about an album that clocks in at 20-25 minutes, and it kind of gets to the point. It is straightforward, or I don't even know if it has to be like straightforward, but just there's this, what in my notes here, I put it as an economy of like economic use of time. Like they're just like, we got this little bit of time, we're going to go in, we're going to crank it out, we're going to put our best material here, we're not going to load it up with filler like a lot of bands will. I guess those bands don't think they're loading it up with filler, but I do think there's a lot of bands that go, we need 13 songs, and they're like, do we have 13? Well, let's write a couple more, you know.
Let's take the song that we should have spent more time with and put it on the record. And yeah, it's also very easy to get by on a homogenous sounding record. Is much more enjoyable when it's short. When you don't have 30 plus minutes of the same BPM and the same keys, you can really blow people away with 20 minutes of the same songs. I mean, that's literally why the Ramones have so many good records, because they're just like, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's the same song, and it's only going to be a 20-minute record. Like,
and plus this was like 1995, and it's like the CD era.
Oh my
like
God.
They very easily could have been like, CD bloat, this album's 51 minutes long. I'm like,
it's
16 tracks,
double album, 2 CD. Both CDs are like 40 minutes long.
71 minutes on the CD, and we're going to use all 71 minutes.
Yeah.
Weirdly, a lot of skate punk bands go by that, but not.
Yeah.
Not this album.
There were a lot of skate punk bands. They did do that. It's like, you're a fast band, you play fast songs, but you still make a record that lasts way too long to listen to.
Right. And this band could have easily did that.
Go ahead. Say it again.
No, that was my final. I was just saying that this band could have easily, like you guys are saying, they could have done that, but maybe it's because they only had that 1 week, and that was it. And that's, because the other, like, Kryptonite and then the final album, those go a little bit longer, I think. Kryptonite's not too long, but the last album, the major label one, it's a little longer than this. And then the Sob Story is very short, and then I can't remember how short or long I Can See Your Mom From Here.
So that one's 3 minutes. So right there at the maximum length, I think you would want a record like this. Yeah, that one's 33 minutes. Kryptonite is 32 minutes. Yeah, and those make sense too. I think there is something special about this record, because it feels like it's a very specific time and place in the band, because like, they just got this new drummer, just got this new bass player, they had already put out a record earlier in the year, but they were just so like inspired to write these songs, and the label was like, hell yeah, let's do this, because I was like, wow, 2 records in 1 year, that's not a thing that happened a lot in the 90s. I feel like the 70s was maybe the last period where that was like really common to do 2 albums in a year.
Right. Yeah.
Or that's because all you did was music. Like, you were just in the studio all the time, so you had material.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, even like the British punk bands, it felt like they were riding a wave too that they had to kind of like capitalize on within a time frame.
Yeah.
And they were all on the dole.
Yeah.
They were all getting,
big label money.
Just sit there and
The All Music review used the word urgent, and I was like, that's this. I don't usually like it when reviews use urgent in them, but it's a good word for this record.
Some guy on Rate Your Music called Sell Me a God said it gets the pop punk over and done with efficiency and clean, and they only gave it half a star. Okay. Yeah.
This website. People like that.
We could all do like a separate podcast on Rate Your Music.
Just
how it sucks.
We choose one album on the website and just review the shit out of the page for it. There is some of that Swedish garage rock feel on here too. Like, I got a little Hives, a little bit of Helicopters feel, but they do this. I think they do it better here. Like Gaunt does it better than those bands do. I like the Hives. But
it feels. This record does feel kind of like quintessentially Midwestern though, in a way. Like, and it's like the rawness of Husker Du, or like I can definitely see how this is like influential to like D4. I don't know if D4 has like ever named them as an influence, and it might not even be like a direct influence, but like there's something about that kind of like Naked Ray Gun, kind of like noisiness with catchiness, and Husker Du's kind of the same thing of like these absurdly distorted guitars with like pop 60s pop melodies. That feels like it just feels like a Midwestern punk thing that no one else really does. And even like the Replacements, I could see that being, the Replacements being an influence on Gaunt.
Right.
I was kind of curious when you brought up D4. They probably wouldn't have considered them an influence because they were already active by 95.
Yeah.
But I was trying to see if there's anything. I wonder if they ever played together.
Probably. I mean, I feel. Yeah, maybe.
They might have. During 95, I wasn't living up here yet, and so it was kind of hard for me to get to know of shows and actually get to shows. So they may have. The Triple Rock I don't think was around yet, but there was there was a place right across the street from the Triple Rock called the Studio of the Stars, and that's where most of the punk shows were. So they may have, at that time.
Yeah.
It's, even maybe during that week that they were up here, that they played maybe, a few shows around at wherever they could play shows.
Yeah. Yeah, Google's not really pulling anything up, but like I don't know if you would even find anything unless somebody was like tagging old flyers that they were on together,
Right.
It's possible, but maybe Gaunt wasn't necessarily an influence on Dillinger 4, but I could see them having similar influences, in common. Like, I mean, Patty's got a gigantic vinyl collection that he's always pulling from all sorts of different stuff. So, yeah, there's definitely always some like 60s rock and soul in Dillinger 4's DNA too. So, I could see. They kind of it's the parallel thought. They all got there at the same time. What do you call it, Dylan? Train time?
Train time. Yeah. I mean, and maybe it maybe it just goes back further than that, and it's all Motor City. It's
True.
all MC5 and Stooges. Really kind of birthed all of those sounds.
So one thing I thought of, Dylan, with your big question mark of Gaunt before we listened to it, it kind of got me thinking. I was like, why weren't Gaunt more well known? Do you think it was purely they weren't on any big labels until like 98, when it's kind of too late, honestly, for that really to be popular?
I mean, Infamy Reptile and Thrill Jockey were pretty big labels back in the 90s. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like they were on, I don't know, Touch and Go. Maybe that would have been different, but yeah. Also, it's, you hate sounding like a old guy, but in the 90s, touring was kind of different. You still toured all around, but if you were like in Ohio, it took you, 6 hours to get to Chicago, and then another 6 hours to get to Minneapolis, and then, how many hours if you got a show in Bismarck or wherever, if you went that way. Or maybe they didn't even tour. Maybe they never even got to the coast, either one of the coasts. I don't know. They might not have.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I don't know. I think they are. Maybe we're held back by being on the wrong labels though. Because I mean, right. AmRep, they're not what people would have thought of from AmRep at that time. And like, what is Thrill Jockey known for? But like,
more like
the C and K
alternative. Yeah. More like, it's been a long time since I've never really gotten into anything that was on there.
Though they also could have been just overshadowed by the New Bomb Turks, who are kind of a little bigger. They got bigger spots, and they're in the same scene. So maybe like the labels were thinking of them as being like, it's just another New Bomb Turks. We don't need another one of those. But like, they are different. I think they're very different. I mean, they're garage punk, but they just do it completely different from each other.
Right. Yeah, and I think by this time, I think the New Bomb Turks were on Epitaph by now.
Yeah, I think I was trying to pull up exactly. They did Crypt Records, which is the same. Gaunt was on Crypt Records too.
Yeah, Crypt Records is kind of the big garage rock, garage punk label. It's one of them. There's a few of them, but that's one of them that like almost every band like records something with. Yeah, so in 1994, New Bomb Turks, the Information Highway Revisited, that was on Crypt, and then in 1996, Scared Straight was on Epitaph.
Yeah.
So they're kind of right in the middle there.
Yeah. So yeah,
I could definitely see Epitaph being like, well, we already have New Bomb Turks, so
yeah,
we don't need.
Right. Well, but at the same time, they signed the Red Ants too, who are also from Ohio, and they're even more noisy and more screechier than either one of these two bands.
Yeah.
That was kind of a weird signing too. But
I mean, I guess we're, inevitably we just have to speculate because it could be that they didn't want to commit to the kind of touring that you would probably be expected to do on like an Epitaph or even bigger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they certainly wouldn't have necessarily they wouldn't have caught the gaze of like major labels during this time period because they were looking for coastal punk bands almost exclusively.
Though I am very curious how that Warner Brothers deal came about. Like, how does Warner Brothers find Gaunt? Did Kryptonite just do that well independently, or that it got in front of some A&R rep at Warner who was like, I got this cool band?
I mean, when did that record come out? That was
98.
What's the punk trend of 98? What would push? I guess that's like the same time period as like Jimmy Eat World getting signed to major label.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it's the majors just being like, what's next? What's next? We just had No Doubt and Green Day. What's next? Yeah.
What's going to replace ska?
I think too they had the same problem that a lot of other labels did, where it was like, oh, the people who signed us don't work here anymore. Oh, like I think they were another one of those bands. It's just like happened to so many bands. And it's kind of well, maybe that person's not there anymore because they were signing Gaunt to Warner Brothers.
Yeah, when I finally got around to them and I went through I couldn't believe that Brixton or whatever it's called is on a major label. I'm like, how did this happen? This is weirder than like Shudder to Think.
Yeah.
It's like, I have no idea how because what happened there.
Shudder to Think, I was listening to Bandsplain, and they were talking about Smashing Pumpkins, and that is where I finally made the connection to understanding how Shudder to Think got signed. I think it's because they were like looking for another Smashing Pumpkins, and they're like, well, there's another weird voice singer guy. Let's get this one.
I mean, I've definitely made the Faith No More comparison too, because that's a weird fucking band to be on a major label. And like I hear that song all the time at my work in this like walking around this fancy restaurant. I'm like, what? This is weird.
What, Epic? What? That big one?
Yeah. This is not a pop song. This is not a radio song.
It was on the radio.
It's catchy, but structurally it's not.
It is a weird song.
Gaunt had a single out. I don't know if they ever made like a video for that last album too, but I was just reading on the Wikipedia. They had a whole album recorded and they scrapped it, and then they recorded a bunch of stuff afterwards for the major label, which is probably why it sounds so kind of mixed together.
I'm very curious what that scrap label sounded like, or scrap record sounded like.
Like if the album that they should have went, if they were going to go, it should have been this album.
Yeah.
This would have been kind of. I don't think they would have gotten huge, but I think they would have been, of like a respected band, and a band you'd be like, oh yeah, this band's been slugging it out on the road for so long, and here's their, major label album, and it just, it rips from beginning to end, and they're on, hopefully they're not on Warped Tour or anything like that, but they just get on better tours. And but this story is the same story for a lot of bands. So
yeah. I mean, and it's not to downplay AmRep too. It's just such a different sound for them that I think that's why it's weird. But that's a big label. I mean, especially in the 90s, they were really big,
Yeah, and it was just one of those labels that they definitely had like an image they were trying to portray and definitely a sound. And
my last note is that 2 of the members of this band would open a coffee shop called Yeah Me Too in 2005, which I thought was a pretty nice little tribute. I think it's Sam and what's his name? Brett, the 2 who joined on this record. So I wonder if that coffee shop's still open. Let's see. Yeah, Me Too.
It is.
Yeah? Where is it?
It's only open one day a week from 8 to 4 on Saturday.
Yeah.
By the looks of it. I mean, that's just what the Google is giving me. That might be because of, COVID and all that stuff. And so.
That's so weird. I wonder,
pop-up?
it might be a roaster, though. I mean, that could be
maybe.
their main business. Or maybe they just have other jobs and they're like, this is our side gig.
I mean, yeah. It could be in a location that gets tons of traffic that one day and no traffic any other day. Like they're next to the farmer's market or something.
Yeah.
That's weird. Such weird hours. We could go there if you're ever in Columbus, Ohio. Well, I think I've hit all of my notes. Anything final you want to say about it?
No, I kind of got most of my notes, what I was thinking of it and what, how I felt about it. That's generally how I review stuff. It's not more of the technical side because I don't know anything about that. So it's kind of just like, why I picked it and how it's, and so now I've probably, I don't listen to a lot of albums over and over again, but this one I'll go back to at least once a month and listen to it. So that's pretty high praise for me. I don't really like grading stuff, but if I say, oh yeah, I listen to this album once a month,
right,
and then it's like
it's pretty high up there.
It's pretty good.
Any last words, Dylan?
No, I think that's it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for choosing this record because I really enjoyed it. I had a blast listening to it, and my knowledge of Gaunt is now much larger than it was before. We plugged all the stuff up top, so I guess we'll sign off here. Thank you again so much for doing the show. We appreciate you doing the Patreon tier too. That's amazing. We love doing these. They're so much fun. We've actually got another one lined up next week too. So really excited.
Awesome.
It's our Christmas bonus.
Yeah.
Oh boy.